You have come here seeking understanding, perhaps not yet knowing the exact nature of your quest. You may feel emotions that do not seem to belong to you. You absorb the pains of others, often silently, and carry burdens that were never yours to begin with, and yet you believe this is your gift. You call it empathy, but I ask you to pause. What if I told you that the true wound of the empath is not what you have been led to believe? That the depth of your feeling is not merely compassion, but the echo of something ancient and unresolved within your soul. Let us walk together, not in the bright daylight of surface understanding, but in the twilight of the unconscious, where truth reveals itself through symbols, dreams, and archetypes. The empath's deepest wound, you see, is not their sensitivity. No, the sensitivity is only the symptom. The wound lies deeper, hidden in the shadow, nestled in the earliest encounters with the self, and it is cloaked in silence and sacrifice. Many of you empaths were born into environments that demanded silence from your soul. Your ability to sense, to feel, to intuit the truth of others, these were not celebrated. Instead, they became tools for survival. You learned to read a room before you could speak. You tracked the emotional weather of your parents, your siblings, your caretakers, not because you were taught how, but because your very survival depended on it. Your empathy was not born from virtue, but from necessity. It was forged in the fire of dysfunction, and healed the wound. You learned to merge in order to survive. You abandoned the self to preserve the other. You silenced your own rage to comfort the anger of another. You swallowed your grief to become the container for someone else's sorrow. In this, a subtle and profound betrayal occurred, not by the world, but by you, to you. This betrayal was unconscious, and therein lies its power. You forgot yourself, and when the self is forgotten, the unconscious begins to stir. I have long said that the greatest danger to the individual is not external oppression, but in the stagnation. The empath is often imprisoned not by the world, but by their own unlived life. That unlived life becomes shadow, a repository of emotions disowned, truths unspoken, and boundaries never set. The empath becomes a vessel for the collective unconscious. But unlike the mystic who embraces the descent, the wounded empath becomes lost in it. They mistake absorption for connection. They believe that to love is to suffer, that to be compassionate is to be crucified. This is the inversion that must be brought to light. Empaths do not merely feel too much, they feel everything but themselves. And this, dear listener, is not empathy. It is enmeshment. It is the unconscious belief that I must disappear so that you may exist. And what is that, if not the original trauma of the child who was never mirrored, never seen, never allowed to occupy space without guilt? In dream after dream, I have seen this wound manifest. The empath dreams of drowning, of overflowing water, of losing form and boundary. They dream of houses without doors, of skin that stretches too thin, of mouths that cannot speak. These are not coincidences. The unconscious speaks in symbols, and it always tells the truth. The empath's dream is the psyche's lament. It cries, "Where am I? What happened to me? Where did I go?" You may recall the archetype of the martyr saint who suffers for the sins of others. This image is often romanticized, but in the language of the unconscious, it is a mask, a persona, a defense. The martyr archetype hides a secret rage, the rage of having always been the one who gives. This is the shadow of the empath, the one who appears gentle but secretly seethes with resentment. And yet even this rage is a longing to return to the self, to reclaim what was abandoned in the name of harmony. I have spoken much about the process of individuation, the sacred journey toward wholeness. For the empath, this journey is not a denial of their gift, but the reclamation of their boundaries. You see, the self cannot be found in fusion. It can only be encountered in separation. The ego must learn to say I before it can dissolve into the collective. The empath must reclaim their sacred no before their yes can carry any true power. Let us look more closely at the origin of this psychic pattern. Often the empath is a child who grew up with emotionally immature or narcissistic figures. To exist in such an environment is to develop a heightened attunement to the unspoken. The child becomes the parent to the parent. They intuitively learn that their needs are dangerous, that their emotions are too much, too loud, too inconvenient. So they disown them. They cut off parts of themselves in order to stay connected. And this cutting away becomes a wound so silent that even the adult cannot hear it. This is why the empath so often finds themselves in relationships with takers, with those who demand more than they give. It is a recreation of the original dynamic, not out of masochism, but out of a profound yearning to finally be seen, to finally be chosen. But the unconscious is not sentimental. It will keep leading you back to the same pattern until you awaken to it, until you retrieve the part of yourself that was abandoned. Have you noticed how often the empath is drawn to the wounded, to the addict, the angry one, the lost soul? This is not coincidence. This is projection. The empath sees in the other what they cannot yet see in themselves. They want to heal what was unhealed in their own story. But you cannot rescue the inner child by saving others. You must turn inward. You must walk into the dream. You must face the house without doors and build one. When I say that Jung saw it first, I do not mean to elevate myself, but to point you toward the ancient patterns I spent my life observing. The empath's wound is the wound of the animal left unguarded, the inner feminine, the soul image, violated by a world that demands productivity over presence. She becomes overexposed, overextended, always giving, never receiving. And when the anima is wounded, the masculine within, the animus, disappears or becomes tyrannical. There is no inner structure to protect the softness, and so the world crashes in. To heal, the empath must build the inner father, not the punitive father of patriarchal religion, but the sacred father who stands watch, who holds the perimeter of the soul. Only then can the inner mother truly give birth to intuition without being overwhelmed by it. Only then can feeling become wisdom and not just raw sensation. You are not here to drown in others. You are not here to be a mirror that never reflects itself. You are here to embody your own essence, fully and without apology. Empathy without individuation is martyrdom. Empathy with individuation is mastery. It is the ability to feel without losing yourself. It is the art of communion, not fusion. In my clinical work, I have seen transformations that defy logic. An empath, once burdened with the weight of everyone else's sorrow, begins to speak, begins to draw boundaries, begins to feel the unfamiliar sensation of anger, and realizes it is not a curse, but a compass. They begin to differentiate between love and obligation, between sacrifice and slavery. And then something miraculous happens. They begin to dream again. The house gains a door. The water recedes. The dream changes. This is how we know healing is taking place, not through external validation, but through the symbolic life, through the shift in the dream. The image, the archetype, the unconscious responds to truth, not performance. When the empath reclaims the self, the psyche rejoices. Do not mistake sensitivity for virtue. Virtue is not found in how much pain you can absorb, but in how much truth you can bear. And sometimes, that truth will require you to walk away, to say, I choose myself, not out of selfishness, but out of sacred necessity. Let this be the beginning. Let the dream return. Let the wound speak, not in shame, but in revelation. And when it does, do not silence it. Do not rush to interpret it. Sit with it. Let it unravel its mysteries. For the empath's deepest wound is not their pain, it is their absence. And healing will come not by feeling more, but by becoming whole. There is a moment in every soul's evolution where silence becomes unbearable, not the outer silence but the inner one, the silence of the forgotten self. For the empath, this silence is not void but echo. It is filled with the voices of others, the needs of others, the stories of others. The empath often lives like a ghost in their own life, present but unseen, felt by others but unfelt by themselves. And this haunting, my friend, is not spirituality. It is psychological. It is the haunting of the disembodied psyche. You may not have noticed it, but the most recurring emotion in the empath's heart is not love. It is confusion. A deep, wordless confusion that arises not from lack of intelligence, but from over-identification. You feel things, but do not know why. You absorb moods like a sponge but cannot trace their origin. You know what someone else needs before they speak, but your own needs lie buried like ruins beneath a forgotten temple. And this confusion, if left unexamined, becomes your identity. But confusion is the threshold of awakening. Every true transformation begins with bewilderment. The psyche, like the forest in myth, leads the wanderer into darkness, not to punish them, but to strip them of false certainties. You see, what the empath truly fears is not pain, it is separation. It is the terror that if they stop absorbing, stop fixing, stop carrying others, they will be abandoned. This fear is not irrational, it is ancestral. It is the fear of the child who was only loved conditionally, loved for being useful, compliant, invisible. That child never died, that child became you, and yet within that child lies the seat of the true self, not the performing self, not the nice self, but the sacred self, untamed, feeling, radiant, and whole. The empath's task is not to become less sensitive, but to become more rooted, to bring sensitivity into contact with structure, to let feeling be held by form. This is the alchemy of individuation, the marriage of anima and animus, of soul and spine, of water and fire. You may wonder, how do I reclaim what was lost? How do I stop disappearing? First, we must understand that the empath lives largely in the realm of the collective unconscious. This is why they often sense what is unspoken, dream what others deny, and carry archetypal burdens. The danger of such immersion is that one begins to mistake collective energy for personal truth. You feel anxiety, but is it yours? You feel sadness, but whose grief is it? To awaken is to ask these questions, not once, but perpetually. Discernment is the empath's path to liberation. Imagine for a moment a dream. A woman walks into a hall of mirrors. Each mirror shows her a different face, some smiling, some weeping, some angry. She walks from mirror to mirror, trying to remember which one is her. But the more she looks, the more she forgets, until at last she collapses, not from exhaustion, but from disorientation. This dream, which I have seen countless times in my patients, is the dream of the lost empath, the one who has become so many others that she no longer knows her own reflection. Now imagine the same dream, but this time, the woman carries a candle. With each mirror, she asks, "Is this me?" And in each reflection, she watches how the candle flickers. When it burns steady, she knows, yes, this is mine. When it dims or dances, she knows, this belongs to someone else. This is the dream of awakening. The candle is consciousness. The flame is discernment. The mirror is projection. Projection is the mechanism by which we see the inner world in the outer one. For the empath, the danger is in projecting their own unmet needs onto others, and then trying to meet those needs by healing the other. But no amount of healing someone else will ever retrieve the lost parts of you. The only way to wholeness is inward. The path is not easy. It will require confrontation with the shadow, the disowned aspects of the self that you have, labeled too selfish, too angry, too needy. But what if I told you that your anger is sacred, that your needs are not burdens but beacons, that your desire to be seen, not for what you give, but for who you are, is not a flaw, but the soul's deepest hunger? You must make a home for these exiles within you. The dream will guide you, the symbol will lead you, but you must listen. You must cease waiting for someone else to rescue the self you abandoned. No lover, no therapist, no teacher can do this work for you. They may hold space, yes, but you must enter it. You must sit with the pain, not as a victim, but as a witness, and in doing so, you become what you were always meant to be, not an absorber of pain, but an alchemist of it. I have often said that the psyche is self-regulating. It will continue to present you with patterns until the pattern is transformed into purpose. For the empath, the pattern is overextension, the purpose is inner sovereignty, and sovereignty does not mean isolation. It means inner authority, the ability to feel deeply while remaining centered, to love without leaking, to give without disappearing. This, I tell you, is the new mysticism, not escape into transcendence but embodiment of the sacred. The empath is not here to be the world's emotional janitor. They are here to become priests of emotion, stewards of soul, keepers of the threshold. But this role can only be claimed once the wound is honored, not hidden. Let me return now to a symbolic image, a recurring one in the dreams of empaths. A well, deep, ancient, surrounded by stone, water at the bottom, clear but unreachable. The dreamer stands at the edge, afraid to descend. They feel that the water holds truth, but they fear the fall. What is this well, if not the inner world of feeling that was never validated? What is the fear, if not the memory of drowning in other people's emotions? To retrieve the water, the dreamer must lower the bucket. This act is symbolic of descent into the unconscious, into the body, into forgotten emotion. It is not a literal journey, but a psychic one. The empath must reclaim their own emotional body, not just to feel others, but to feel themselves. In this descent, they will encounter resistance, guilt, shame, the voice that says, "You're selfish, you're abandoning others, you should be helping." But that voice is not truth. It is conditioning. It is the echo of family systems that fed on your silence. It is the residue of spiritual bypassing that told you to always be kind, always be giving, even unto your own disappearance. Kindness that erases the self is not compassion, it is compulsion. To reclaim the self is to embrace what I have called the tension of the opposites. The empath must learn to hold two truths at once. I feel you, but I am not you. I care, but I have limits. I want to help, but I am not your healer. This paradox is the seat of psychic maturity. It is what transforms the empath from a wounded archetype into an embodied soul. I will share something intimate with you. Many of the mystics, prophets, and healers I studied and spoke with throughout my life were once wounded empaths. They began as children overwhelmed by the suffering of the world, but through descent, through initiation, through claiming the full range of their humanity, they emerged, not as saviors, but as mirrors, clear, grounded, and free. And this clarity became their power. You do not need to become less sensitive. You need to become more conscious. You do not need thicker skin. You need deeper roots. You do not need to stop feeling. You need to start feeling yourself.